7:12 on a Monday morning. You're sitting in your car in the parking lot outside the office, eating a banana because you were too lazy to make breakfast. The car is a 2013 Honda Civic. The paint on the driver's door is starting to fade. The air conditioning works when it feels like it. And there's a small crack in the windshield that you've been meaning to fix for almost 8 months. 2 spaces away, your coworker pulls in. Brand new BMW. Black. Clean. Still carrying the temporary dealer plate. He gets out wearing a watch that probably costs more than your monthly rent. You look at him, he looks at you. You both nod. Then you open your phone. Not Instagram, not your email, your brokerage account, 186,420. You stare at the number for about 3 seconds, then you close the app, you grab your banana, and you walk into work. Nobody looking at you this morning would think you're wealthy. That's exactly how you wanted it. Because 3 years earlier, you would have done almost anything to make people think you were. Back then, you were 29. You had just crossed $70,000 a year for the first time. You remember the exact feeling. You didn't feel rich. You felt behind. Your friends were buying houses. People from college were posting vacations in Italy. One guy you barely knew had somehow bought a Porsche. You were renting a 2-bedroom apartment and checking your bank account before ordering delivery. But the salary number had finally become respectable. $70,000. So you did what people often do when their income increases before their confidence does. You upgraded your life. Not dramatically, just enough. A nicer apartment, better phone, more expensive restaurants, a new couch, a gym membership you barely used. Then came the car. Your old Civic was completely fine. It started every morning. It got good gas mileage. It had never left you stranded. But you were embarrassed by it. You remember sitting across from the salesman. He asked what monthly payment you were comfortable with. You said $450. He smiled. He found you something for $447. You signed. That $447 felt strangely good, not because of the car, because of what the payment seemed to say. You had moved up. You weren't the person driving the old Civic anymore. You were somebody who could afford a $447 car payment. For the first few weeks, it worked. You parked farther away from the grocery store so people wouldn't see the scratches. You kept the inside spotless. You found yourself looking back at it when you walked away. And then, slowly, the feeling disappeared. The payment didn't, the insurance didn't, the maintenance didn't. Only the excitement disappeared. That's the problem nobody explains about lifestyle inflation. It doesn't feel like a mistake while you're doing it. It feels like progress. You don't wake up one morning and decide to become financially trapped. You make one reasonable decision, then another, then another. And eventually, the life that looks successful from the outside starts requiring your paycheck just to remain standing. You discovered this one Friday night. Your checking account had $412 in it. Your credit card had $3,860. Your car payment was due Monday, rent was due in 9 days, and your next paycheck felt very far away. You weren't broke. That was the strange part. You made more money than your parents had ever made at your age. You had a decent job, good health insurance, a nice apartment, a nice car. You looked successful, you just didn't have much freedom. That weekend, you went to dinner with an older man named Martin. He was a friend of your father's. You'd known him for years, but you had never really paid attention to him. He was 68. He wore the same brown jacket almost every time you saw him. He drove an old Toyota, not a vintage Toyota, not one of those carefully restored cars people buy because they're collectors. Just an old Toyota. One of your friends asked him why he still drove it. Martin laughed. Then he said something you didn't understand at the time. He said, "There's a difference between owning expensive things and owning your time." The conversation moved on. You didn't. You thought about that sentence the entire drive home. Because for the first time, you realized something uncomfortable. You had been measuring your financial progress by what you could buy. Martin seemed to measure his by what he no longer had to worry about. The next morning, you opened your bank account, then your credit card, then your retirement account. $14,700. That was everything. Almost 10 years of working. $14,700. You sat there staring at the number. Then you did something you hadn't done before. You calculated how much of your paycheck was already promised to someone else. Rent, car, insurance, phone, subscriptions, restaurants, credit card payments, you added it all. The number was uncomfortable. But the uncomfortable part wasn't the amount. It was what the number represented. You were earning more. But your freedom wasn't increasing. Your lifestyle was. That Monday, you made the first decision. It was not dramatic. You didn't quit your job. You didn't sell everything. You didn't start nut trading stocks. You didn't discover some secret investment. You simply canceled 3 subscriptions. Then you stopped ordering food during the work week. Then you changed the car payment. Not overnight. You waited until the lease ended. And when it did, you bought a used car. Cash. $11 to $800. It wasn't impressive. Nobody complimented it. Nobody asked what model it was. Nobody at work cared. And that was the point. You started realizing that money spent to impress strangers disappears very quickly. Money invested where nobody can see it can keep working for decades. So you automated $300 from every paycheck into your retirement account. You didn't wait until the end of the month. You moved it first because you had learned something about yourself. If the money stayed in checking, you would find something to do with it. There was always something: a restaurant, a trip, a new device, a nicer version of something you already owned. So you made the decision before your brain had a chance to negotiate. Pay yourself first, then live on what's left. The first 6 months were boring, almost painfully boring. Nothing happened. Your friends didn't notice. Your family didn't notice. Your coworkers definitely didn't notice. Your life looked almost exactly the same, except the number in your account was slowly moving. $16,000, $19,000, $23,000, then $27,000. You started checking it less. That was the first strange change. You used to check your bank account because you were afraid of what you would see. Now you checked your investments because you were curious. The number had stopped being a source of anxiety. It had become evidence. Evidence that your future was slowly becoming less dependent on your next paycheck. Then the market fell. Hard. You woke up one Tuesday morning and saw that your account had dropped by $11,000. You refreshed the screen, same number. You refreshed it again, still there. $11,000. Gone. Or at least that's what it felt like. Your first instinct was to stop contributing. Maybe wait. Maybe move everything to cash. Maybe protect what you had left. You called Martin. You told him what happened. He listened. Then he asked you one question. Did you need the money this week? You said no. He said, then why are you treating a long-term investment like a grocery bill? You didn't have a good answer. So you kept investing. It felt stupid. It felt uncomfortable. It felt like deliberately walking into a burning building. But every paycheck, the automatic transfer continued. $300, then $350, then $400. The market eventually recovered. And something more important happened. You recovered psychologically. You stopped needing the market to go up every day. You started understanding what the money was actually for. Not a new car, not a watch, not a screenshot. Freedom. At 32, your investments crossed $50,000. It didn't change your life. That was the strange thing. You woke up the next morning and still had to go to work. Still had meetings. Still answered emails. Still sat in traffic. But something underneath your life had changed. You had options. You could survive a bad month, then a bad year, then eventually a bad job. That is when wealth starts feeling different. Not when you can afford more, when you can tolerate more. A year later, your company offered you a promotion, $18,000 more per year, 3 more hours of meetings every week, more travel, more responsibility, less time at home. 3 years earlier, you would have said yes before they finished the sentence. This time you asked for 48 hours, you went home, you looked at your accounts, you looked at your expenses, then you looked at your calendar, and you realized something. You didn't need the promotion. You wanted the money, but you didn't need it. Those two things are completely different. You turned it down. For the first time in your adult life, you made a financial decision that wasn't about maximizing income. It was about maximizing your life. Your manager was surprised. Your coworkers were confused. One of them asked if you were worried about falling behind. You smiled because you finally understood something. You can spend your entire life trying to catch people who aren't even running the same race. At 34, your investments crossed $100,000. This time, you didn't tell anyone. You didn't post it. You didn't send a screenshot to your friends. You just looked at the number for a few seconds. Then you closed the laptop and went to bed. Because something had changed. The money was no longer exciting. It was becoming normal. That's when you started noticing the difference between looking wealthy and being wealthy. Looking wealthy requires maintenance. Being wealthy requires patience. Looking wealthy needs an audience. Being wealthy doesn't. Looking wealthy asks, what will people think? Being wealthy asks, do I actually want this? And once you start asking the second question, your spending changes. Not because you're cheap, because you're harder to impress. You stop buying things simply because they're expensive. You start asking whether they are useful. You stop upgrading because something is old. You upgrade when the old thing stops working. You stop caring about the newest car. You start caring about how much the car costs you over 10 years. You stop asking whether you can afford the monthly payment. You start asking whether you want to own the entire obligation. That distinction changes everything. At 36, you finally replace the Civic. You buy a 3-year-old Accord, $21 to $400. You pay cash. The salesman looks almost disappointed. He spends 15 minutes explaining financing options. You don't need them. You drive home. The car is nice. Very nice, actually. But you don't feel different. And that's when you realize you have finally crossed a line. You can buy the nice thing. You just don't need the nice thing to make you feel successful. There's a difference. A few months later, your friend buys a $78,000 SUV. He loves it. You don't judge him. You used to be him. You know exactly what the purchase feels like. The smell of the new interior, the attention, the feeling that you've finally arrived somewhere. You understand it. You just don't need it anymore. Your net worth passes $250,000 that year, then $300,000, then $400,000, and something unexpected happens. Your salary starts becoming less important. Not unimportant, just less important. At $70,000, every raise mattered. At $100,000, every raise mattered. At $130,000, every raise still mattered. But now your investments were beginning to move in numbers that your paycheck couldn't match. One good year in the market could add more to your net worth than an entire year of work. That doesn't mean you stop working. It means you stop believing work is your only source of financial progress. That is a psychological shift, and it changes the way you behave. Your boss gets angry, you don't panic. Your company restructures, you update your resume. A large unexpected bill arrives, you pay it. Not because money doesn't matter, because money has finally started doing what you originally wanted it to do. Protect your choices. Then one winter morning, your father calls. The roof needs replacing. $16,000. You ask how much he needs. He says he'll figure it out. You tell him you'll cover half. He says no. You insist. He asks if you're sure. And for the first time, you can honestly say yes. Not because you are rich enough to show off, because you are financially strong enough to help someone without putting your own future in danger. That is when you understand what wealth is actually buying you. Not cars, not watches, not restaurants, not status, capacity, the capacity to say yes, and also the capacity to say no. At 39, your net worth crosses $700,000. You barely notice. At 41, it crosses $900,000. You notice. At 43, you wake up one morning and open the account. $1,043,800. You stare at it. Not because the number is unbelievable. Because you remember the $412 in checking. You remember the three's $860 credit card balance. You remember the car payment. You remember sitting in the parking lot wondering why everyone else seemed ahead. And suddenly, you understand something. You were never actually behind. You were just measuring the wrong thing. You thought progress meant having more visible things. But the real progress was happening somewhere nobody could see. Every automatic transfer, every lunch you brought from home, every used car, every promotion you turned down, every time you didn't upgrade, every time the market dropped and you stayed invested. None of those moments looked important. Together, they changed your life. And that's the frustrating part about becoming financially independent. It doesn't feel like the movies. There is no moment where music starts playing. Nobody hands you a trophy. Your neighbors don't know. Your coworkers don't know. Sometimes even your closest friends don't know. You just wake up one morning and realize that the things that used to scare you financially have become manageable. The $500 repair isn't an emergency anymore. A bad month isn't a disaster. A job loss isn't immediately terrifying. A $10,000 opportunity doesn't require 6 months of planning. And eventually, you realize that the biggest thing your money bought wasn't anything you could put in a driveway. It bought you distance. Distance from panic. Distance from desperation. Distance from needing every paycheck. Distance from saying yes to people because you can't afford to say no. And maybe most importantly, distance from the version of yourself who needed other people to believe he was successful. It's Monday morning again, 7:12. You're sitting in the same parking lot. The BMW is still 2 spaces away, except now it's a different BMW. Your coworker gets out. He waves, you wave back, you look down at your phone. Your investment account is at $1,186,000. You close it. You don't feel rich. You don't feel poor. You feel something much quieter. Free. You start the Accord. The air conditioning works. The windshield is fixed. The car isn't impressive. You don't care. Because you've finally learned the difference between having enough money to look successful and having enough money that you no longer need to look successful. And nobody in that parking lot knows the difference. That's okay. They don't have to. Because real wealth was never supposed to be impressive from the outside. It was supposed to make your life feel different from the inside. And if there's one thing worth remembering, it's this. The richest decision you make may be the one nobody notices. The car you don't buy, the upgrade you skip, the paycheck you invest, the promotion you turn down, the lifestyle you refuse to inflate. Because one day, years from now, you'll look at the life you built and realize something almost nobody tells you early enough. You didn't become wealthy when you started making more money. You became wealthy when you stopped needing your money to prove anything. So the next time you see someone driving a car that costs more than your annual salary, don't assume they're ahead. And the next time you look at your own life and think you're behind because it doesn't look impressive yet, remember that the most important part of wealth is usually invisible. The account nobody sees, the debt you paid off, the emergency fund nobody knows about, the investments growing quietly in the background, the freedom waiting for you years from now. That's the kind of wealth that doesn't need an audience, and that's probably the kind worth building. If this story changed the way you think about what being wealthy actually looks like, subscribe. There are more stories like this coming. And ask yourself one question before you go. Asterisk, is there something in your life right now that you're buying to look successful, when you could be buying your future freedom instead? Because the answer to that question might be worth more than anything sitting in your driveway.